We've got a tough economic decade ahead, and we've also got the rise of immigration. And both of those factors are the perfect petri dish for nationalistic demagogues to flourish.
Welcome back to BVTV. I'm Peter Farlarsson, global editor of Reuters Breaking Views, and I'm joined again by Hugo Dixon, coming from back in London this time. Hugo, hi.
Hello, Peter. Lovely to see you.
Good to see you. So we're sort of getting to the end of the year, and you've been sort of thinking big thoughts about the past year, and particularly thinking big thoughts about the state of democracy. Doesn't get much bigger than that. Just give us a quick summary of how you sort of see things as we reach the end of 2022.
More or less, I think that democracy has two challenges. One is from autocracy. That's more like an external challenge. And, particularly we've seen the sort of question of, do the liberal democracies, do they have a model that's going to be more or less appealing than the Russian model or the Chinese model? I mean, those are the particular ones out there. And I think this year has completely destroyed any attraction that there was for the Russian model, and it's taken quite a lot of the gloss off the Chinese model. So in that respect, it's been a good year for democracy. The second challenge to democracy is an internal one, and this is from I call demagoguery, following the sort of, the ancient Greek, the way that Aristotle thought about these things. And this is when it's sort of democracy is perverted by demagogues who offer simple solutions, who rabble-rouse, et cetera, et cetera. And on that level, I think it's also been quite a good year. I mean, the top demagogue in the world is really still Donald Trump, and he's had a rough, tough year. But also the fourth largest democracy in the world is Brazil, and Bolsonaro was kicked out. So I think you can say that this was a good year for democracy on both the internal and the external front.
But I'm sensing a but coming now. So if we have to sort of look forward to 2023, can we sort of say the democratic recession that people talked about over the last few years, that's over and democracy has survived, or at least in many places has survived and is thriving again? Or should we be a bit more concerned?
I think we could say it's survived, and it probably will survive for quite some time. Whether it's thriving is another matter, and it is still under challenge. And I think that the way I see it is, I actually see that probably the bigger challenge is the internal challenge of demagoguery. And we've got a tough economic decade ahead, particularly in Europe, but across other large parts of the world. And we've also got the rise of immigration. And this is not just a 1 year or a 2 year thing. I think this is a multi-year thing, which is being driven by a lot of things, but probably in the future, the most important one will be climate change. And both of those factors, it's sort of mass immigration plus economic difficulties, are the perfect petri dish for nationalistic demagogues to flourish. And of course, if you get a demagogue who's sufficiently entrenched, after a period of time, they may become more and more autocratic, and you could ultimately get the descent from democracy through demagoguery all the way to autocracy. And so this is certainly still a threat. And the other reason that I would add to this is that the nationalistic demagogues, they have a very good answer, not a very good answer, but a very appealing, quick answer to the problem of, let's call it the meaning crisis in the West. And their answer is, well, you may feel that you've lost your community, you may feel that you're having this mass immigration. Well, just stick with us, turn back the clock, traditional values, and pull up the drawbridge. The liberal Democrats, in the loosest term of the word, broadest term of the word, find it very, very difficult to challenge that rhetoric.
I mean, I guess you could also say, though, that the thing that people always say about liberal democracies is that they bend, right? And that sort of more rigid autocratic systems tend to break. And I mean, if we'd been having this conversation 6 months ago, we would probably still have been talking about China as having done reasonably well in terms of its management of COVID. Well, that zero COVID policy now completely troubled. So I guess I wonder, is there a sense here where you can sort of say, well, the sort of the more flexible liberal democratic systems have been better. They've made lots of mistakes, but they've been better at adapting to the problems, and maybe we should think about that going ahead as well.
I think we should, and if you think in terms of two sort of different areas, one is, let's say, competence, and the other is, let's say, in terms of addressing the meaning crisis. I think in terms of competence, this ability to course correct is a big positive for liberal democracies. The fact that they're able also to free people up to be creative, and therefore you can actually have more ideas, whether it's economic ideas or political ideas or cultural ideas, is also a huge positive. And I think you can say that the last year has shown us actually two things. Autocracy isn't working. It's not been working in Russia. It's not been working in China. But demagoguery isn't working either. I mean, in the UK, Boris Johnson's prime demagogue who brought us Brexit, which has not been good, but he was then pushed out this year in a whole series of sort of scandals. And then his successor, Liz Truss, who had this very populist policy, which was basically cutting taxes and increasing spending. She was out within 6 weeks. So they're not working. And that's a very important thing, competence. But I think that human beings are still needing something more at a sort of more, at a deep level. And although I think that bashing up foreigners, which a lot of nationalist right-wing demagogues do, isn't the answer, it certainly has appeal.
So on that sort of pre-Christmas note, time in 2023 for us to find a bit more, solve the meaning crisis. We can come back to that, Hugo.
Very good.
Thank you very much.